All right. One second. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of La Comadre Network Live. And we are here with some very special comadres talking about the incidents that have been happening in and the the downtown LA protest, also in solidarity with the folks in Minnesota. And we have Kulia Pringle with us, who we're super excited to have and talk to. She's actually in Minnesota. She's actually been protesting. She's a longtime activist in the state, a champion for kids and families, and we're like very excited to have her here. You'll hear from her in a minute. I just want to give everybody a little bit of a background of what we're going to be discussing, talking obviously about the lynching, murder of George Floyd, who was allegedly writing a bad check, who was dragged out of a store in Minneapolis and was killed by a police officer. The video has been gone viral and has been shown all over the internet. I personally have not been able to watch the video in its entirety. I can't. But from everything that I've heard, it's horrific, and it's not anything at all. And the police officer's face in the video, to me, really was horrific. Like, just a very smug look of power and sort of demonic kind of expression of the power that he was exerting over a human being. And that was enough for me to not want to continue watching the video. Now, before we go on, I do want to talk a little bit about because we're mostly an educational platform and we talk a lot about education in California and all over the country. So I want to talk a little bit about the word lynch, because it has seemed to be controversial for some people. But let's be honest about what the word lynch means. Okay, to lynch is to kill someone for an alleged offense, and excuse it, the poor grammar, it's with or without a legal trial. That is what we are seeing happening here. We are seeing police officers take these matters into their hands and decide what is the outcome for this person. What Eric Garner, selling cigarettes, he was killed. Oh, I can't breathe. These police officers that go above and beyond what they're supposed to do, and in the name of or under the color of authority, they are killing Black men in America. And so we have to be very intentional about what we're calling it, because it's murder. It's lynching. It is targeting a class of individuals and exerting your power and authority in a lethal manner, whether we like it or not. An offense of writing a bad check is a death sentence given to anyone. If a person is truly resisting arrest, that also is not a reason for someone to be killed. And so we have to have this conversation. In that vein, I've developed a training, a very quick and a very inexpensive training for police departments all over America to use. And I want to share it because it's very easy to implement in any police department with any police officer. So, and we'll just say, you guys can do this training very easily. And let me see, just put it up there. Okay. And it's very simple to implement. Technical difficulties, one moment. Okay. it'll come up on the screen in a minute. But it's very simple. It's just a basic concept that everyone should be able to handle. Can you guys see it? Yeah. And so this is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about how we can help and support the communities in Minneapolis and all over that are going through what they're going through. We want to be able to be in solidarity. And what can we as comadres do to help, um, just whatever it is the cause is leading toward, and how do we get these individuals held accountable? We're going to talk about that. So with that, I want to bring in, that's my training. Just stop killing Black people, police officers. So I want to let's introduce Kulia and just talk a little bit about your background and what's going on.
Sorry about that. So my name is Kulia Pringle. I am a family advocate with the Minnesota Parent Union currently. And what I do is I support families one-on-one as they navigate the education system. And that is however that looks, whether that's going to a meeting, advocacy, um, just sharing information. And then I'm a former educator. I taught at a high school. Um, so I also educate parents on their rights and policies that may affect them, and policies that they should look for or um, or want to advocate for, and then policies that they may want to advocate for. And then I also organize and mobilize to get the actual education system transformed. Um, as I said, I'm a former educator, social
Mm-hmm.
studies. I taught at a charter school in St. Paul, and I was teaching and organizing families at the same time. And I didn't have enough time in the day and made the decision that I needed to organize families full time because I couldn't work in a system um, that was oppressive without changing the system so that I feel comfortable working in it. Um, I'm currently here in Minnesota. As you know, George Floyd was tragically murdered the other day by Minneapolis Police Department. Um, Four officers had their whole bodies on this man, while one officer had his knee on his neck, and another officer stood by and watched as bystanders pleaded with the officers to let the man breathe as he pleaded for his life. I can't breathe. I need water. And mom, can you come and help me? Last night, our city burned, or Minneapolis, one of our cities burned last night. And St. Paul is under the threat of being burned as we speak right now. Oppressed people are sick and tired of being sick and tired. People are fed up, and enough is enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I almost just really I'm tearing up because I can't even imagine, and folks that say, well, you lost us at the looting. Listen, this is a long time coming. These are feelings that people have had. I don't even care about the looting. Uh, and how can people be pissed off about that and not be pissed off that a man just died? Not
Every
a man, several hundred men.
Yes,
This is just another one, right? And so
yes,
I'm not even tripping on the looting. I don't even care. Like, these people are pissed off. First of all, we're in a pandemic. They've already been quarantined. It's already that. And then on top of all that, we have this nonsense. So yes, people are pissed and people are looting and people are burning shit. And
yes.
maybe that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, Minnesota is home to the worst disparities when it comes to education for Black and Indigenous kids, when it comes to employment, housing, everything you can think of. The one of the worst place in the country for Black people is Minnesota. And then you add that on top of COVID, and then you add that on top of a man we watch a man lose his breath on camera as another man puts his knee in his neck and just sits there cavalierly.
Yeah. Yeah, so okay, let's introduce you to some of the other comadres here online today. We've got Alma, who is the co-founder of the La Comadre Network and leader of our Fampire. So let's talk a little bit to her and find out what her thoughts are.
You know, I'm so grateful to all of you for being willing to get on in such short notice. I want to thank everybody who's watching us live on such short notice, because we can't allow for these types of tragedies. And I've been posting about it on my personal social media. I mean, for me, this is like, it's public torture. And we can't be silent, because I believe that if we're silent, we're complicit. And we say, our silence says to people, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. And for me, having grown up in a working class community with Black and brown friends, like, this was just really too much. Like, all of the different murders are a lot, and they're a lot to bear. It's like every time we feel one, every time we experience one, there's outrage, and we all feel it a different way. But something about the way that this went down has really just shaken so many of us, because it happened publicly. It happened with people who are supposed to protect us. It happened with other people who are supposed to protect us being complicit. There was nothing that the bystanders could do. Like, there was just so many things. And then as we've learned more about George, like, he was in Minnesota from Houston to work. How many of our families have to move to find work, right? He had a baby. There's this beautiful picture of him and his daughter 6 years ago. Like, he was a father. That little girl's gonna grow up without a dad. Like, and there's just all of these things. And then he was there on a church ministry buying food for people who needed food. Like, that could have been any person, any Black man in the wrong place, in the wrong time. And as Latina women who are allies to Black community members and who fought alongside Black folks, it's important that we talk about this from our perspective as Latina women who are the heads of our homes. And what are we doing to teach our kids about this? How are we talking to our kids about this? And what are we doing to make sure that we are also talking about this, so that Black people aren't the only ones talking about this? You don't have to be Black to feel this pain. Like, this is a very real pain that all of us are feeling, and we need to, like, uplift and talk about that. So I'm really grateful that we're talking about this, because it's rare well, first of all, it's rare to have any Latinas on camera anywhere. You know, we're not on TV, and we don't get to talk about our genius, and our genius is never on display. And it's even more rare to have us talk about our community as a Latino community, talking about what and how we can support Black people in this struggle. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have a different kind of conversation and experience together, because La Comadre is about supporting our communities and making sure that we're in solidarity in moments of crisis too. And I'm just really grateful that we're here, and I want us to continue to do this as we carry out our work. But Julia, like, my heart is with you. I think all of us are just feeling this in a very, very deep way.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Alma, for that. Yeah. We also have a couple of the other comadres. We have Roxanne. Roxanne is in the Valley, and she works with a lot of parents as well, and she had posted some stuff on social media. I mean, it's affected all of us, and we just like really want to make sure that we have this platform and we have people who listen to our platform, and we want to make sure that we speak out. So Roxanne, introduce yourself and just tell us how you're feeling.
Sure. Roxanne Desario. I do similar work to what Coolio was sharing about working with families in whatever that might mean as far as their educational journey with their kids. I organize parents and inform them and keep them informed of what's going on. I think that I think for us, and I know Alma definitely relates to this, and I've seen her post things about this before. This is just very reminiscent of the LA riots. Living here in Los Angeles, even if you don't live here, everybody knows about the LA riots and what happened with Rodney King. And that actually happened, the beating happened like 5 miles away from where I live in Lakeview Terrace. Which is was a very high populated African American community. Unfortunately, a lot of those folks have left because the area has become too expensive, even though it's still not a wealthy area. And I remember that day. I remember when the riots happened. I was living in North Hollywood. I was probably about my daughter's age now. And I remember my mom worked in Hollywood, and she frantically called the house to see if we were okay and find out where we were. And I wasn't there. I was gone. I had left the house and walked around the neighborhood to meet a friend, and my mom was losing her mind because she was seeing what was happening in the streets from her office in Hollywood and not knowing where her daughter was. Thankfully, I was okay, and there was nothing happening in the Valley quite yet, but it did make its way over there. So we're seeing things happening in downtown LA right now, and people have just had enough. People have just had enough, and people who don't understand, they've probably never been in a position where they have to understand, but it is time for us to teach them, to educate them. I have an older family member, a cousin that I care about very much. And when I posted something about, these murders and killings that are happening, she basically said that I was spreading the hate by sharing it. And I said, no, I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm bringing awareness to this. I didn't murder this person. I do not support this. And I am bringing awareness to this so that people know what's going on. And awareness is one thing, but action is the other. So we can post things on Facebook all day. We can post memes and things like that, but we also need to take action. And that's just how those people are feeling in the streets right now. They don't know how to take action. They don't know what to do. They are so frustrated and so hurt that this is all they can do. And it's just trauma coming out. And I think people need to be a little bit more understanding of that. I could keep going, but I won't. I'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I know. Well, yes. I mean, we all can. And that's great that you brought up the Rodney King thing, because I think that we forget, like, this is not new. And I know a good friend of ours, Maria Villamil, is posting on the comments, and she said something that is so true. This is not one-time tragedy. It's systemic and racist attacks on Black lives every day. And that is #fact, right? So, yeah, by the way, if you have questions or comments, we do read them in real time. So we can respond if you have something that you want to ask any one of the comadres on. I invited Lexi to come on because she recently watched something on Netflix that was sort of related to what we're talking about. And I haven't had a chance to watch it. And also because she has like a really super awesome perspective on things all the time anyway. So wanted to invite her on to talk a little bit about the media and how these things get portrayed.
Thank you, Leticia. So I'm Lexi. I'm in Sacramento, but I grew up in the Central Valley. And we had a call this morning, and they mentioned they were doing this, and I was like, have you guys seen Trial by Media? Because the day that George Floyd was murdered was the same day I ended up watching this show, and they covered the murder of Amadou Diallo. I feel like I'm saying his last name incorrectly, but he had just immigrated to New York, the Bronx, and he had only lived there for 2 years. And he had immigrated there from Africa. His whole community was supportive of him. He told his mom that he wanted to go get a computer science degree. And he was shot 41 times by 4 police officers. He was an unarmed man. They said that they were, they didn't end up having a good explanation for anything, but it was outrageous to me to know that his mom flew in to not the reunion she thought she was going to have with her firstborn son. And she flew in, and Reverend Al Sharpton had to explain to her the relationship between Black males and the police in the United States, because that's not what she grew up to believe, looking at the media and watching TV, like American TV shows. She didn't think that that's the relationship that we have. I'm not saying that other countries don't have that, but it was another rude awakening for me to know that other countries don't have, like, our whole entire country is built off of racism. Another documentary to watch is 13th, and how our entire prison system was built to be legal slavery. And it's the murder of Amadou happened in 1999. So that was 11 years ago. And I just broke down crying watching it, because I'm like, nothing has changed. Because you watch the interviews with them, and, you know, they're slightly hopeful that there's going to be some like, they got a settlement in 2004 for $3 million. But what about training the police officer? Because it wasn't just the police officers that was a part of the problem. During that, they covered the fact that the mayor race in New York switched from, they just had the first ever Black mayor, and he had just lost the election, and it just turned the tide for racial tensions there. And they ended up moving the trial from the Bronx because of bias, and moved it up to Albany, New York, where the percentage of white people is like double that of what it is in the Bronx. So it's not really a jury of Amadou's peers. It was a jury of white people from Albany who would look down. And so it just really kind of shook me to my core that it's not just a one-off instance. These are just instances that the media brings up and highlights, and we're all looking at. But I think Leticia said this morning, there was another unarmed Black woman who was killed yesterday. It's not just a one-off thing. It's not just a one instance. And one of my friends even pointed out, like, lawyers have to go to 8 years of schooling to understand the law and to be competent to be in the courtroom. How much training are we giving our police officers? And why aren't we focusing on that? Especially because the system was built to be racist. How are we systemically looking at the system to change it?
Yes.
I was going to say one thing about the Amadou case. He was in front of his house too. That seems to be like the theme, like Black folks just doing regular things. I'm just standing in front of my own house, and so I get shot 42 times. I'm just jogging, and so you shoot me. I'm just selling cigarettes. I'm just breathing. I'm just laying. I'm just barbecuing. I'm just existing, and it's bothering you. And also one of the reasons that
I'm just in my grandma's backyard.
I'm just in the backyard. And then the other reason why Sharpton had to inform Ms. Diallo about the relations between Blacks and the police in the community was because the police had flown her here and was giving her a hotel. So they were putting her up, and she was under the guise that, oh my, these police officers are just so nice. And so he had to explain to her, ma'am, like, if you sleep there or you go to this hotel and don't join the people, there's going to be an issue. And he had to explain that history to her. I just wanted to point that out, that, there's very rooted, like, racism was built in the United States. White supremacy was built in the United States. We know this Bacon's Rebellion, it's history, it's a socially constructed thing. It does not exist. There is no such thing as the Black man and the white man. Although as Black folks, we have no choice right now but to call ourselves Black because we've lost our identity. And there's so many of us across the world that we just need to connect. And so now we are a part of the Black diaspora. White folks can go back from this thing that they created it and claim their ethnicity, whereas we have our ethnicity stolen from us, and we have to deal with the issue of race.
Exactly. And one of the things that, because as a former educator, I mean, I also taught social studies. So like, you're my sister, Julia, because I taught social studies as well. And thing is that we do not teach true history to our kids. They get this whitewashed, nicey nice of what happened that's not even accurate. And we really need to be pushing to really teach our kids. For example, how did we end up with a police force? Well, I mean, like, just Google slave patrols. Just Google it, people. If you want to know the truth about your history and how police started, that's how we got police officers. Originally was to intentionally go out and search for and target slaves and torture them and incarcerate them for no reason at all. I mean, it's like sort of like the witch trials in Salem. It was the same kind of thing. Like, you just hunted Black people for freaking whatever, right? And so let's know our history and let's teach it to our kids. And also stop trying to make the Black culture a scary thing to white kids. Like, because schools do that. Let's just be honest. Schools do that, and we need to lobby against that. So we definitely need some work in our education system, which we already knew. But one of the questions that I have, Lexi mentioned training, and I know that we all have people in law enforcement in our family, and the big thing is like, well, the police officers just need training. No, because what kind of training do you need that makes you a human being that want to kill people? There is no, like, you're either a racist or you're not. And well, there are some bad apples. No, because if you're a bad apple and you kill somebody and the other apples around you are okay with it, you all are bad apples. That's called complicit. That's called you're an accessory to the crime. You're condoning it. You're okay with it. You're not doing shit to stop it. That's not acceptable. So the argument that these people need training, to me, is like ridiculous. I of teachers who got training on how to teach kids in poverty, how to understand the culture, the African American children, how to understand the culture of Latino children, and how can we teach teachers, for example, how to deal with all these cultures. And they didn't learn shit because they continued to be racist and not want to teach colored children. I left teaching partly because I did not want to be a part of an oppressive, systemically racist system. And I wanted to do something more to change it, right? So I left teaching, and I loved teaching, and I was a really good teacher. But I just could not be surrounded with these teachers who were just racist as all get out and did not want to have anything to do with really teaching our colored kids. The same problem exists in police department. You a lot of racist people who are on the force, and there is no amount of training that is going to reshape their thinking on other cultures. They think that their culture is superior and their authority on people, and we give them a badge and a paycheck to do it.
And a contract with our kids to be in our schools, to patrol our kids. We also give them a contract to patrol, to put their feet and their knees on our kids' necks.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So there is no training. I mean, fight me. Somebody tell me, what training could we possibly give people?
Well,
because I understand that another thing is we're not training colored cops to not kill the white people.
Letty, I think part of what we have to do is we need to have real honest conversations about what's happening. We need to call things out as we see it. We can't be silent or complicit in the behavior, in accepting this behavior and pretending it's okay, and saying that, things are not that bad, or it was just a mistake, or whatever. Salma, who is here in East LA, is an amazing young woman who is part of our network and who has been organizing for excellent schools, has been a student leader, has been very active in the indigenous Latino community, Mexican community here in California. And she was totally inspiring, went out yesterday to protest in solidarity with what was happening. And so I'm hoping that Salma can also provide us with a perspective on what she sees. Is it training? If you could talk about what happened yesterday, what you experienced, and then also your perspective as a young woman, and that next generation, mija, of La Comadre network, of how do we do right for your generation, mija, and what do we do to help support you and your friends and kids and young people your age, so that you don't have to see and experience this trauma over and over.
So my name is Salma. I identify as an indigenous Zapoteca Mixteca. My parents originate from the mountains of Oaxaca, and I grew up here in Los Angeles. I think ultimately it comes down to, again, our education system and the kind of education our students are receiving. For me, my story is a little different in the sense that I attended the only indigenous-based school in the country. So my curriculum was very much embedded into cultural and identity and tradition, and ultimately really learning the true history of our country and the Americas overall. Really taking a look at colonization and ultimately through our education, decolonizing and what that means. So I think ultimately it does come down to our education system and the kinds of curriculums we're providing in our schools. I think that really our identities and histories have been stripped from us. And it's saddening to really see that many of our young people are just starting to learn the true history and really starting to see what has been taking place in this country for over 500 years. 1492 is really the start of colonization and really ultimately the system that we operate in, and we ultimately think that this is the only way that we can be living, but in reality is that we were very much living and thriving all throughout the world. Indigenous peoples, the originals peoples, were definitely cultivating the land and ultimately caring for one another and really new communities. So I think now my experience through going through a K-12 indigenous-based school has revolved around community organizing and advocacy. But I think with time, I began to feel very frustrated that many people my age were not necessarily understanding the realities that many people face. And with time, I just learned that if you don't feel angry or bothered by what is taking place, that's privilege. And it's a privilege to not feel like this is affecting you directly. I think yesterday at the protest, I walked away with knowing that, and when we took over the I think it was the 101 freeway, when we went into the freeway, the cars were backed up. And so once people started to clear out and cars started to roll by, many were supporting and honking and very much cheering on, the solidarity that we need to be demonstrating. But many people were flipping everybody off and just angry at that they're now stuck in traffic. And so I walked away with knowing that's how we know that they don't necessarily understand what is happening, or feel that they are being affected in any way. And so again, it goes back to us being complicit in what this country has ongoing genocide that is still perpetrated through our education system, because we're not necessarily speaking about these things or embedding these topics into our history books. And so I think that ultimately we do need to build community and raise awareness. I think on the day after the tragedy that took place, me and my friend who is from Minnesota jumped on a FaceTime call and we're processing very much what just happened. And, and we definitely reflected on the fact that we shouldn't have to see these videos on our timelines and our feeds. In reality, these situations have been happening, and now it's just going back to we have access to technology and devices that can live stream and show these tragedies taking place. But in reality, we should not be sharing that kind of content, in terms of we shouldn't even have to. So I think it was definitely a lot of different feelings and a lot of different energy that I was feeling, which is what I know for me going out yesterday was a decision that I had to really sit with before taking the action to go. I was definitely scared just because we are in the middle of a pandemic, and I knew that going out to downtown would be exposing myself. But I also thought maybe people are also thinking along those lines. And if I'm healthy, then maybe I should go and show my solidarity. I think I was a little afraid of what was going to happen during the protest, especially after we entered the freeway. I knew that there's only one exit out and there was thousands of people. So I wasn't sure what that was going to look like. Unfortunately, we saw that news coverage caught the footage of a patrol highway car that pretty much wanted to just get through and was taking people along, and people were jumping on the car. They cracked the window and the person flew off the hood of the car. So it was definitely starting to escalate. I thought that after that, it was definitely going to go into something else. We received a phone call telling us we need to get out of there because people were seeing this from their home, that this just happened. And so we weren't sure what was going to happen. Luckily, we were still in the freeway. We made our way into where the scene was. We ended up, the protest ended up leaving the freeway through the exit, and we ended up going in front of the Metropolitan Detention Center. And that is where, again, there was people speaking out. And I think that was really a moment where I just felt a lot of sadness, because we're standing outside of a detention center. You can hear the inmates knocking on the windows and just hitting the walls and making their noise inside. And so it was definitely a surreal moment for me. I grew up, protests for me were something that I was always a part of since a very young age, maybe 3 and 4 years old. My dad's always been a community member, an active community member, always organizing for his communities. And through Semillas, that was a lot of that was part of our education.
Yeah.
That was just the norm for us. But I think with time, I did start to see this shouldn't have to be. But I understand that there's work to be done, and that's our role here. And to have such a safe space like Semillas is such a blessing, especially just to know that so many young people that are my age and my friends are like-minded, and we understand a lot of these struggles that our brothers and sisters and relatives are experiencing. I think one of the most heartbreaking things to also learn over this past week was that the same officer that killed George also had killed a Native American brother years before, and so his family were posting about that. And so I think it's obvious that this is ongoing genocide. It's very much intentional. White supremacy is very much the root of a lot of our things. Definitely.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for going out there and putting yourself out there. There's a pandemic going on, and for the young people that were involved in making their voices heard and making sure that people know that they're not going to stand for it, because you guys are the future. This is your future, and I'm so glad that we have young people like yourself and others that are out there demanding justice. One of the things, Kalia, that I see happening, have not done in other cases around the country, is the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey is his name, has been speaking out and has said that he wants these people arrested, right? The governor of the state of Minnesota has said, why are they not under arrest? I want to see arrests happen. The University of Minnesota came out and said, we will no longer work with the police department. The president of the United States today, he wants to, of course, this was his idea, then whatever, he wants to take credit for it, but he said that he wants an expedited investigation as well, which is unheard of because, he never wants anything justice done. But anyway, I'll give him that for today. But what is your sense there in Minnesota about what the people of Minnesota will and will not be okay with? Because I feel, from my point of view over here in California, that they're saying, we're not the ones. You're not going to do this here. Tell us, because you're there. What do you think?
I think that they're paying very good lip service. I'm grateful that the chief of Minneapolis, immediately after meeting with, I believe, 15 Black leaders, he thought about it and decided to fire the officers immediately. And so currently, I guess, because it's in the hands of the BCA, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the Keith Ellison, state's attorney, has to wait until after the coroner's report. And so once the coroner's report says that, the manner and cause of death, then, and, with the witnesses' testimonies and stuff, then Ellison can then proceed and charge. But I've heard that he cannot charge until the medical examiners release their findings. So that's what we're waiting on right now. I do believe, we all saw Philando get killed. We all saw Philando's murderer get arrested and charged, but we also all saw Philando's murderers get acquitted. Same thing with Rodney King. So, step one, they got fired. Step
do you
two,
think it could be different in Minnesota?
Do I think what?
Do you think it could be different? Do you think it could be different? The outcome could be different in Minnesota?
I think it could be different because the whole death is caught on camera. Philando's death was caught right after the fact. So the officers were still able to say, I feared for my life. Most of the time it's I fear for my life. I don't know how I fear for my life is going to stand in this situation. So I do feel like it's going to be different. They stood on his neck for 5 minutes. How did you fear for your life? So yeah, I do think this case is different.
Do you see that there are more than the normal amount of white people who are also outraged by this action?
No, not in Minnesota. Since day one, the forefront of Black Lives Matter in Minnesota has been white folks. They've been the face of BLM here in this state, and it's always pissed me off. So they've been consistent.
Amazing. I do notice that on, of course I'm not there, I'm here, and most of my network is here, but I do notice that some of the people that would normally not be, would be more defensive of the police, are finally now saying, oh, hold up, wait a minute, that was fucked up. Okay, that was bad. So that,
Yeah,
I'm seeing people do that.
Yeah, I don't think anybody has an explanation as to why 4 men could have their knees on somebody's body while he's handcuffed on the ground, and then I'm just gonna sit with my knee on your neck as other people are telling me to stop. Like, what is, like, there's no explanation for that. And I think that's why there's more, you're probably seeing the unusual suspects, supporting justice for this man.
And there was additional filming that took place prior to, the actual horrific act of the knee on the neck. There's actual footage of
That shows
him
he was not
being taken
resisting.
out of the store, walking.
Yep.
He's not resisting.
Yep. He's
So
cooperating.
there is that also.
He's cooperating.
Yeah, exactly. What needs to happen, I feel, and you guys can chime in, what needs to happen is they need to be held accountable. They need to be arrested. They need to be charged, tried, convicted, and sent to jail. And I think that would send a message. Minnesota could be the game changer in these situations if they do it right. What do you guys think? Anybody?
I agree. I mean, it didn't happen in California with Stephon Clark because, like Coolio said, that they were able to use the argument that they feared for their life because it was dark out, even though he was in his grandma's backyard. And unfortunately, our DA, the Sacramento DA, decided not to press charges. So in that, Black Lives Matter Sacramento really came out for them, did the same exact thing that was happening down in LA, closed down I-80, and there was a bunch of people complaining for the protest, but a man had died. And I really did thought that maybe because it's literally 2 blocks away from the state capitol, maybe because we're California and we keep saying we're different from other states, we're different. I thought that maybe we would be able to enact some change, and unfortunately, we weren't able to in that case. But Dr. Weber introduced some legislation into the state assembly, so I will mention that. And so hopefully things will change. But I am hopeful, given the fact that there's several leaders out there who are condemning the actions, because you didn't see that out here. You didn't see people outside of activists condemning the actions outside, saying that they should be arrested. You didn't see that from anyone except for activists. So it makes me, at least, they might just be talking out of, well, I don't know, but it makes me genuinely hopeful that maybe some justice can actually happen for George Floyd, his family, his daughter, and the millions of other people of color who just want to go outside. They want to go for a jog. They want to walk their dog. They want to just deliver mail for USPS or whatever they're doing. They just want to live their lives without fear of being murdered. And it's gotten to a point where it's just, how is that the life living in pursuit of happiness when you can't go outside? You can't call the one body that the country and your state provides to protect you. And it's evident that white people know that they can use it against people of color, because that woman in New York,
yes, girl,
to say a Black man's harassing me, she knew exactly what that meant and how that could put that man at risk of dying.
Yeah.
And I just really hope that Minnesota is able to turn the tide and we can have other similar actions. It would set precedent to other states and for other victims' families to say, this is not okay. This cannot be a new normal. It's a new normal, because we can list out so many names. There's so many names that just go, that they're not highlighted on CNN or Fox News or anything. They are unnamed people that the police murder, and it has to stop. So I am thankful for everyone who's been fortunately immunocompromised, so I can't go out. But I'm very thankful to every single person who's out there risking their lives too to uplift the voice of someone who was gone too soon. He should be out there being able to speak his truth and what actually happened that day, and he's not able to. And that's an injustice and a disservice to anyone who calls himself American. Like, that's just ridiculous.
Just want to say lynching is not a modern day phenomenon. The cameras are.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That is the difference. It is 100% the difference. And it now, you know, and I think that was the other thing, was that the police officers did not care that the videos were being taken because they didn't fear accountability. They weren't motivated to stop because they just thought they could get away with it. And that's part of why we need to talk about this. That's why we need to make sure that all eyes are on you, right? Like quoting Tupac a little kind of, you know, but like making sure that we're talking about the fact that this is unacceptable and that allies need to like stand up and talk about this. And even though this situation was, you know, brutal and literally, like I've been saying, torture, he was tortured in front of the camera. That this happens all the time. And growing up in different neighborhoods where we know the relationships between police officers and, you know, men of color, Latino men, Black men, this is historic, you know, Indigenous men. We know that this is part of that like unfortunate racist history that we all share, that we don't hear about in schools, that we're not taught about in schools. My daughter and I were talking last night about how she never learned about lynching of Mexicans in the Southwest until she went to college. And that's when I learned about them too. I was like, we probably took the same Chicano studies class, mija, because that's where I learned about Mexicans being lynched in the Southwest and how similar that trajectory was to the African American community in the South. Right? And so how do we make sure that, that we continue to talk about these things? I mean, for me, Letty, like the thing is we've got to talk about it, and we've got to force the conversation with our friends about these things. We have to force the conversation.
Yeah.
And as Latina women, we have to talk about Black men and Black women. We have to stand in solidarity. We can't divide ourselves. And we have to be crystal clear that this is happening to all of our communities. But like, we 100% have to be visible and talk about it publicly and privately.
No, and which is why we wanted to make sure and invite Julia here and make sure that she knows that we are with her and her community, and we want to support whatever she's doing in whatever way we can, and even if that means making those calls that get an indictment from whatever we need to do to make that happen, because we really, this could really be a game changer, like I said, because if Minnesota can hold them accountable, and if they actually go to jail and are held accountable, that sends a message to the rest of these empowered and emboldened officers who think they can do this. Hey, wait a minute, maybe not so much. Maybe the tide's going to turn. Maybe, you know, what do we learn in Minnesota? Maybe I'm being optimistic, but I feel like this could be the start. Maybe it's the tipping point, because at some point, everyone gets to the tipping point. And I think we're there in this country where people are just like, hopefully done. So whatever we need to do to support Julia and the community in Minnesota, we will want to do that.
Can I add something on that? And it was something that Salma said that really made me think about this and thinking about the younger generation. You know, I have a sister who's 10 years younger than me. She's in her late 20s. And, you know, we were talking about this, and she was saying how she was so frustrated with just seeing people share things and not taking any action, not doing anything. So how do we help motivate the people who didn't grow up the way Salma did, where, you know, activism was a way of life? You know, the charter school she went to, you know, implemented this and really showed them how to do that. For those people, there's going to be some that are just not going to take action no matter what, because to be honest, I just feel they're self-centered. But there are those folks out there that maybe do want to take action, and how can we help them? And another thing my sister was saying with her generation is that you really have to lay it out. Like, you have to lay out, this is who you call, this is what you want to say, this is, you know, the letter that you want to send or something like this, and really hold their hand through it for those folks who maybe want to get involved but really don't know where to start. I've seen some resources on that lately, maybe that we can share, but I think it's an important way, because this younger generation is going to be the ones that are going to have to step up next. You know, they're the ones who are in college, and even our kids that are in high school right now. You know, this is the school to prison pipeline. This is what it is. And George Floyd was, you know, a man who was educated and was doing things, and this still happened to him. So imagine the kids who are maybe not on the right path, or ending up in juvenile hall, and like my cousin, and targeted, and just targeted their whole lives, so they can't ever find that right path, because every single thing is working against them. You know, people need to understand. I'm tired of hearing from people, oh, well, I grew up in the hood and I made something for myself, so those people need to do it too. Well, maybe you have a little bit more motivation. Maybe there's something inside you. You have parents that support you, or maybe parents that don't support you, and that's what motivated you. But just because not everybody has the resilience that you do to get up and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, as they say, doesn't mean that other people, that it's okay for them to suffer and for us to not help them. Oh, well, nobody helped me, so why should I help them? Well, that's a bunch of BS, in my opinion. And we should be here helping each other and helping that younger generation learn how to use their voice. I didn't grow up as an activist. I just started about 4 years ago, and I dove in. Think about how many other people have never been involved that would dive in as well, and become a true champion for these issues.
Yeah.
Kulia, do you have like resources or phone numbers for who you think that we should be contacting out as advocates in California, who you think we should be calling and really putting pressure on?
So I don't have the phone numbers, but I do have names. The two main people would be Mike Freeman. He is the Hennepin County district attorney. That's who we're waiting to file charges from, as well as Keith Ellison. Keith Ellison, state's attorney. Mike Freeman, Hennepin County district attorney. Also, Superintendent Ed Graff of Minneapolis Public Schools. We don't want those cops in our kids' schools. Those same cops that are killing people, we don't want them in our schools. So Superintendent Ed Graff of Minneapolis Public Schools needs to cancel the contract that he has with the Minneapolis Police Department and put that money into counselors.
Oh, wow.
That $2 million.
Yes. Okay, can you spell the name?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Ed Graff?
Ed Graff, Graff. Yep. FF.
We'll definitely add the contact information. We'll pull it from the internet, and make sure to share it, and especially those three things. So those of us who want to help from a different part of the country can show our love and our support and our good vibes by calling for accountability with those three folks: Ellison, Graff, and the superintendent of Minneapolis.
Yeah. So I want to thank you guys. I mean, there's never enough time to like really, talk like everything that needs to be said, but this is a good starting point, and we see you, Julia, we got you. We're going to get those names up, and we're going to have our network contact those people. Absolutely. These police officers should not be around our babies. So we got you, and we'll do what we can. Thank you all for joining us for this special edition of La Comadre Live. And we'll see you at our regular time on Saturday morning, 10 a.m. for another great topic. Thank you, comadres.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you, Kulia.
Peace out.